Welcome, my name is Jeff Archer. I'm a product engineer on the ArcGIS Indoors team, and have been kind of dabbling in indoors and indoor positioning systems for about 4 years now. And I kind of came at this from the indoor positioning side of things. So I used to prototype with getting that blue dot inside of a building, and met up with some people at Esri that were working on getting maps inside of buildings, and also coming up with ways to make routing inside of a building a little less painful. And we kind of started on this research project, and some of you see a few familiar faces when they were walking in. Some of you probably seen me give this presentation over the last couple of years, and have hopefully seen some of the growth. And today is really exciting for me because we actually have a release of this product coming up in March 21st. So it's been a long time coming. If I have bags under my eyes, you guys will know why. Trying to get stuff across the finish line, and will be as well for the next couple of weeks. So thank you for joining, and let's get started. So one of the things that we've really consistently seen, and this product really grew out of a lot of our internal project work and helping people get maps and scenes and network data sets, that sort of thing, for the built environment. And consistently what we see is people solve these problems every day, especially any kind of a business that deals with a large amount of real estate. In the past, that would have been shopping malls, right? Now it's more corporate campus. We have one ourselves in Redlands, and we have them spread all over the United States. So we have like a classic corporate campus use case just here at Esri, which has served us pretty well and continues to do so. We are one of our own customers. And one of the things we see, though, is a lot of times these workflows where they try to determine, okay, we want to place people so that they have everything they need to be successful, or that they feel like they're a part of this team. A lot of times that happens in a tabular format or on a whiteboard, or a lot of people will print out a map that's usually like a fire evacuation map or something, and mark it up with a marker on the wall. These things get done, but one of the things that we've seen is when people actually see that information in a GIS and they're able to ask intelligent questions of that information, the light bulbs really come on. So currently about 2/3 of the people that we talk to, and I think some of these numbers actually come from Gartner surveys as well, still use email, pen and paper, printed maps and documents, usually CAD drawings for things like floor plans, or maybe BIM if they're Revit files if they're really advanced. So there's really a need there to kind of bring things into the 21st century and to bring GIS into this kind of new frontier of mapping indoor spaces. And in the past, this was something that was technically possible, but the bar was really high. I mean, you had to do a lot of work around a lot of limitations to be able to build maps of indoor spaces and be able to use those on a day-to-day basis. So we really strive to try to make this easier. And that has now borne fruit in ArcGIS Indoors. So we refer to it as a complete indoor mapping solution. It does both 2D and 3D, which makes sense because building is inherently 3D. The third floor is at a different level than the first floor. So everything is inherently 3D. We do accurate indoor positioning. And again, this is how I kind of came at the product. So it's been kind of exciting to see that market evolve. And also I see some of our friends from Indoors in Austria. You guys probably heard an announcement about that in the last week or so. We're very excited about that as well. We'll touch on that a little bit later. And also one of the things we want to promote is this idea of sharing and collaboration. And you'll hear me kind of repeat this in this session, and also if you come and talk to us in the showcase. What we're talking about here is really just GIS. So all the things that are really valuable about a GIS, the things that are great about an ArcGIS portal, the things that are great about Pro, all those things are brought to bear now on just indoor data sets. So the idea of sharing and collaboration and making a map and sharing it with people that can embed it in the workflows that they do every day and maybe haven't been exposed to this kind of information can really get people excited. So it's really nice to see people kind of light up and to have customers start to use this product and really kind of stretch its legs and get it into all parts of the organization is really cool. So one of the things we focus on is kind of start with the obvious, employee mobility. And I know speaking from personal experience, sometimes when you go to a campus that may even be for your same organization, like the first time I went to the Denver office, for example, I had no idea where anything was. And so to be able to find where I need to go, I had to talk to the receptionist, and she says, oh, go upstairs, and then you go past the coffee maker, and and then you go down the hallway, and yada yada. And it'd be really cool if I could just have an app. So when I'm in the Uber from the airport to the office, I can actually see the route from the front door to where I need to meet this customer. And we have a lot of people ask us about that because it doesn't take too many employees searching for too long for something in an area that they're not familiar with to really add up to some serious money. Employees cost a lot. And you want their time to be as efficient as possible, and especially if they're meeting with a critical customer, you want them to be there on time, less stressed out because they couldn't find the meeting, walking in the door, ready to do some business. So, this is a really common workflow that we want to support, and we'll see that in some of the demos in a minute. Another thing that consistently comes up is security. And, this is unfortunately a reality in the world that we live in today. There are situations where security is paramount. And if there is a situation that comes up, first responders need to have accurate maps of what this campus is, where this thing is going on. They need to be able to find where the safe zones, where, what is the evacuation plan. There's a lot that can go into that, and seconds really matter in a situation like that. So this consistently comes up as a use case and is also something we're really kind of focusing on supporting with ArcGIS Indoors. And continuity as well. Here we're looking at a screenshot from the convention center last year, and we had some people opt in to have their phones followed. We set up a tracking service with a geo event server, and people could opt into this, and we can kind of see how they moved around the convention center. And this kind of helped us figure out, this was like a prototype, so that maybe we can change the layout to be a little more user-friendly, or how can we maximize people's experience while they're there in San Diego? And I'm not ashamed to admit the white hot area in the middle there is the ArcGIS Indoors booth, just saying. And so yeah, we had a lot of people come by, and it was really exciting last year, and we had the indoor positioning set up, obviously, and that's what allowed us to create this heat map. And a lot of the stuff that we prototyped in that actually made it into the product. So device tracking is going to be something that's actually in the first release of the product. We're going to use GeoEvent. It's an opt-in thing, so don't panic too much. People can opt in, though, and then you can track as their devices move around a campus. We've had a lot of customers that are really interested in that. Just a short anecdote. I mean, architects, what they do is design buildings so that people will move through them efficiently. And a lot of times what looks good in a drawing may not translate to how people actually use the space. So a good example is Building W at Esri. It's got this nice facade that faces out on Redlands Boulevard, but the back of the building is actually facing the rest of the Esri campus. So there's this wonderful entryway that never gets used. And like the double steel doors on the back of the building is where everybody goes in and out. And that's just kind of one example. You can track how people move, and that can really affect how you plan for things in the future. So you can also increase planning productivity as you start to, this is again, we're just talking about GIS, right? So one of the strengths is you can analyze change over time. And you can do the same thing with indoor spaces. You can say, hey, we did a big reorganization, we moved people around. How did that work out? Are we spending more money? Are we spending less money? Are we doing better with employee retention? There's all sorts of metrics that you can start to think about once you start building a data set that you can ask intelligent questions of. So in the first release, we're really focusing on kind of as a list of the functions. We've got data curation and map making probably is the primary focus. One of the things that always comes up early when we talk to new customers is, yeah, I want this like yesterday. And when we ask the question, well, what kind of data do you have? And usually they're like, they have to think about that for a little while, or maybe do some digging, and maybe they have really great data. In some cases they have, departments that maintain floor plans on an active basis. In other cases they don't. And maybe they have, just a series of digital files over the last 25 years, none of which is consistent. There's everything on the spectrum that you can imagine. And some people have no data, and that's okay. So one of the things that we're really focusing on is for people that do have data, we want them to easily be able to bring that into the ArcGIS Indoors data format, our new data model for ArcGIS Indoors, and also be able to update that data on a regular basis. For people that don't have data, we just are wrapping up the partner conference here, and we've had a lot of partners show a lot of interest in helping people get that data. There's a lot of really good technology. You can load up a cart with all kinds of fancy sensors, run it around the building, and then generate some really detailed 2D and 3D information for that interior space. So there's a lot of solutions, even if you don't have any data at all. Routable network creation. In the past, this was a fully manual process, and frankly, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Having to manually digitize a network data set for an indoor space is not something I would consider fun. So what we try to do is to come up with some tools that can help automate that process, and we'll take a look at that here in a little bit, how that works. Also web and mobile wayfinding, basically point-to-point routing, and in cases where there is an indoor positioning system and a blue dot, to allow people to use that as a way to route to what it is that they're looking for. So if you know their current location and you're looking for, say, the ATM machine, you can search for the ATM machine, and then the route will go by default from where your blue dot is to where the ATM machine is. We're working on trying to do actual wayfinding, where the route will adjust based on where your blue dot is. That's something that's coming in the future, though, so I want to be sure and clarify that. At the first release, we're really focusing on point-to-point routing. We also, because it's just a network data set, we can also do multi-stop routes. We can do what's a lot of times called the traveling salesman problem. You've got 15 inspections you need to do across a campus. You can put those into the directions widget, solve that for the most efficient route across campus. That is supported, because at the end of the day, it's just a network data set. It's not some special indoors thing. It's just GIS. Mobile indoor positioning, we've kind of touched on that already, and we'll look at it again here in a little while. And I mentioned this already, we're supporting device tracking with the first release. So GeoEvent is going to be included with ArcGIS Indoors. You'll be able to set that up if you want to, and be able to track how people move through your space. And we have a lot of customers that are really excited about that. Shopping malls and airports make a lot of money based on the leases they charge for people who rent space inside them. And if you have a heat map and somebody says, man, you're charging me a lot of rent, you can say, hey, look, well, all the foot traffic is right in front of your spot. That's why we're charging you extra. That's a neat thing from a commercial perspective. Location sharing. If I need to meet someone, one of my colleagues, say here in Palm Springs, and we're going to meet at a designated spot, I can actually email a link that will open the application to that spot and allow them to route directly to it, which is that's a pretty neat thing. And how did we come up with all this functionality? Generally speaking, we kind of boiled down the people that we talked to that were interested in ArcGIS Indoors, and we came up with a set of 5 user personas. And eventually we want to be able to fully support all these personas, but we also need to get a product out, so we really just focused on 2 for the first release, and that's going to be the map maker. So the tools that are available in ArcGIS Pro to create and curate indoor data sets and maintain that geodatabase and the network, that's really been a primary focus. Our idea is, all this other fancy stuff doesn't really matter if you don't have the maps to be able to plug into it. So we see that as being a huge value. Just being able to type somebody's name in a search box and actually see a route to that person on campus is such a huge thing. So people have not had that before. So we're really focusing on kind of like allowing people to get that really basic indoor functionality and build that foundation to kind of build some more advanced functionality down the road. We're also looking at the occupant and visitor, and this could be a lot of different people. If you think about a university, this could be a physical plant employee. It could be a potential student visiting the campus with their parents. There's a lot of different, descriptions for what this occupant or visitor might be. But we're looking at supporting that mainly with the applications that we provide. And with that, I'm going to minimize these slides for now. And we're going to start off here in ArcGIS Pro. And got a bug on my computer. And we're looking here at, these are CAD drawings for a building here, well not here, but in Redlands. And these CAD drawings are organized by floor, and this is for building L on campus in Redlands. And we can see that we have a CAD drawing for each floor, and these CAD drawings are actually quite good. They conform to the AIA CAD standard, which if you're a person like me and you're evaluating a customer's CAD data, if it's AIA CAD data, you're like, that's good, because all the layer names are consistent, and generally speaking, any CAD standard is good. What you don't want to see, of course, is like everything on layer 0. That's as good as having no data. But in this case, we actually do have good data, and you can see here we also have polygons. That's another big bonus. And essentially, we want to use ArcGIS Pro to kind of evaluate what's our starting point. So if we know we have some data, we can directly read in Revit files in Pro as well. And so this kind of helps you learn to ask the right questions and kind of figure out, okay, where do we want to go? You know, what does success look like for our projects with ArcGIS Indoors? And then the next logical question is, what is our starting point? So if you have some data that you can reuse, obviously it's a good thing. Even if you don't, it's not the end of the world. Like I say, there's a lot of people who specialize in generating data sets for indoor spaces where there is none. So just wanted to start with that. It's kind of an important starting point. If you do have that kind of data and you have a department that maintains that kind of detailed floor plan data, that's a good thing. You can make use of that data. But the end result, we're going to use geoprocessing tools, and here I'm kind of highlighting in the catalog pane there this floor plans to indoors tool. This tool allows you to kind of map how you want to import that CAD data. So we spent a lot of time refining this tool, and it does all kinds of neat things like here, see if I zoom in. Let me switch back to the CAD. One of the things that we see about CAD drawings is they have these kind of interesting door swing features, right? And this is a standard thing in a CAD drawing. And some people like that and some people don't, because when you import this and you create polygons from it, even if you have a little routine that can close this doorway and make that room a room and this room a room, this remains as kind of an artifact, this little polygon right here. So that can cause a little bit of a headache. And in the past, you had to manually kind of go in and clean those things up. And with these import tools, you actually get an option. You can keep those as they are. You can have the tool close the doorway, which is what has happened here, or you can have it close the doorway and delete the swinging door feature. So we've kind of built this kind of thing in based on our own experience and working with customers and their data. Just one example of kind of some of the things that we put in there. Also, you'll notice here that the label for the rooms matches up really closely with what you see in the CAD drawing for the annotation. We allow, as part of the import, to map the annotation values to attributes in the output geodatabase. So just another time-saving feature. If you have good data, we want you to be able to make use of it. And once you've created the web map, I apologize for the little thing that keeps sliding in there. IST is like hassling me to install updates and reboot, but I'm not going to do it right now. Don't worry. And now one of the things I mentioned earlier is indoor data is inherently 3D. So when I bring these CAD files in, I can import and I can also say, like, this is the address of the building, this is the absolute elevation at the ground floor of the building, this is what the floor height is, this is what the ceiling height is. I can put all sorts of information in there, and what we end up with is Z-enabled features. So we were just looking at a 2D map, but it's pretty academic to actually, that's 3D data that we were looking at in a 2D map. And now we can actually create a 3D representation of this building. And this is, you know, really good for visualization. There's a lot of, you guys know all the good things about 3D are still the good things about 3D, but especially for indoors because it is inherently 3D. So you can, you know, come up with these great visualizations. We're still working with cartographers because this is kind of new. We're trying to figure out what's the best way to display this. And, you know, this is not what I would consider my favorite. We've kind of prototyped with some other stuff and played around with, like, instead of extruding the walls, extruding the polygons for the offices. And what that does is it kind of, your brain thinks about, as you're walking down the hallway, it thinks of the hallway in 2 dimensions, and it thinks of the offices off the hallway as volumes. And so when you visualize that in 3D, it sometimes is like, oh, that kind of makes a lot more sense. So you think about a defined indoor space as a volume, you can display it as a volume. So I'm just kind of, it's a digression, I guess, but we're just looking at different ways to kind of present this information. So stay tuned for some more on that. We have a lot of cartographers that are getting really interested in helping us, which is a good thing, because I'm not a cartographer. So we can also create mobile map packages. Again, this is just GIS, so nothing I've told you is really unique. It's all based on the data model that we've come up with for ArcGIS Indoors and the fact that we're using 3D features. So with the mobile map package, we're going to package all this information up, and you'll notice that the network data set is included as part of that. And you may ask yourself, well, how did he get that network data set? We did not manually digitize it, I can assure you. We actually have some tools, and here I'll expand the Indoors Network toolbox, and you can see two tools in particular. One's called Generate Pathways, and one's called Thin Pathways. We also have some subsequent things called Classify and Create Floor Transitions, but this is really where most of the magic happens. So Generate Pathways, what it does is creates a preliminary network that is this, the scientific term for this is a tetrachus lattice. So we basically come up with this kind of mesh, and then we clip it by the floor plan of that floor, and it creates this kind of rough network. And then when we thin that network, we end up with kind of this circuit board looking pattern. And this is, the internet's getting stressed today. Actually, my machine's getting stressed. There we go. So this kind of circuit board pattern is essentially this network with every destination in this floor linked to every other destination in the floor. And it's up to me as a map maker what a destination is. I could make this closet a destination. I could make the HVAC, closet, or the elevator, mechanicals, offices, obviously, kitchens, bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. I can put all those things in there as destinations on the network, and when I solve, the tool is actually going to add that as part of the network, and then we call it thinning that rough network, but it's actually basically pre-solving all the routes on the floor. And once we do that, we can create transitions. And let me turn those on real quick. And you can see now the elevator shaft. That might be kind of hard to see, but there's an elevator shaft right here and a set of stairs right here. And what that does is it connects the kind of circuit board on the third floor to the same one for the second floor to the same one on the first floor. So now I can solve a route from a first floor office to a third floor office, and I can tell the solver whether I prefer to go up an elevator or the stairs. So I can model all kinds of stuff into this because it's just a network data set. I can model in ADA compliance if I want to. I can put other restrictions in there. If there's zones in the building that have keycard access, I can model that into the network. So if I don't have that keycard, I cannot route to a certain area of the building. These are all things that are possible because, again, we're just doing GIS. Just happens to be inside of a building. Now, how we make this available to all the applications is we can go to the Share tab if we have a map and just share a web map. With a web scene, we share, I'll give you two guesses, a web scene. And with the network data set, we can also share that as a routing service, or we can share it as a closest facility service. Any of the analysis layers that we want to add to Pro and publish to our portal, we can do that. Now, the network analyst is one of the big reasons why, with the first release, we do not support ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online does not give us the ability to publish network services yet. And I think that's coming at some point in the future, but I don't know when. So right now, ArcGIS Enterprise is required, and the network data set is a big reason for that. We need to be able to publish those network services. Point-to-point routing inside a building and across a campus is a huge use case, so we have to have that. All right, so next we'll look at the web applications. And with the web applications for ArcGIS Indoors, you get a twofer. Here we're looking at kind of the standard This is what we call a lot of times the PC or just the browser-based ArcGIS Indoors web application. And here we're looking at the Redlands campus, and I can kind of highlight on each of these buildings, and and that just basically is telling me that this is clickable. And if I want to go look at building Q, I can click on that, and then I can see the floor plan in there, and I have the ability to switch floors. So all of this information started out as CAD files, and then we imported it into the ArcGIS Indoors information model. We created our map for the entire campus, and then we published that to a map service. So what I'm looking at here is just a standard map service from an ArcGIS portal. And the developers in the audience will appreciate that this is just a map service, and it's just the JavaScript API. Really, the only custom work that we've done here is this floor picker. Everything else, so if I generate a route, this is just the directions widget. We have not customized this at all. It just works because we're just using a network data set. So if I route from building Q, let's say I go from my office to building Q, you can see that I route from one building on campus to another building on campus. And that strategy that I just mentioned of kind of the semi-automated creation of the network data set, I can do that from building to building and then connect those with, say, the walkways across campus. I can also model in bus routes and bicycle lanes, that sort of thing. We have a couple of customers that are working with us on implementing multimodal routing, and it's not something that we don't have an automated tool for that, unfortunately. At some point, hopefully in the future, we will, but it does work, so. Okay. Now, some other things that we can do, that's directions we can also print. You can see once we've identified something in the map, I can actually just clear this route. I'll close that, and then I'll just always use Pete Schreiber as a good example. So here we're looking at Pete's office, Q3 East 10, and I have several actions that I can do. I can set this as my home location. I can save that location to my places. I can also, if there's let me look up somebody else here, Patrick Wallace. And Patrick is another SEC college alumni, so if I want to go to his office and maybe talk about some SEC football, I can route to his office. I can also say, this guy has way too much Auburn stuff at the end of the hallway and it hurts my eyes. I can do a survey 123, kind of a 311 report for that area on campus. So this could be for anything, really. I mean, in this case, it's for an office. It could also be for a fire extinguisher, or if students on campus, one of the bicycle racks is broken, this is a way for them to report that is the case. And also I can share this with my friends or coworkers. I can create an email or a copy to clipboard. And one of the cool things about the share functionality is if I send it to someone who opens that email on a mobile device that has the ArcGIS Indoors mobile app, which we'll look at in just a second, it's a deep link. So if they click on it, it's actually going to open the app to Patrick Wallace's office. If they don't, it'll open a browser on their phone to Patrick Wallace's office. So they'll actually see that thing that I share in the app when it opens. That's something that we've worked to really implement, and something a lot of our customers are really happy about. Let's see. So if I know exactly what I'm looking for, a lot of times I'll use this search box. If I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking for, let's say I want to try to find a place to eat lunch. I know I'm looking for a restaurant. I might use these categories to try to find what it is that I'm looking for. So if I look for the Esri Cafe or Bingerong, I can see those things. I can click on that and then zoom the map to that location. So these categories are actually configurable, and they come from a single feature class in the geodatabase. So the data model that we've generated for ArcGIS Indoors, we've designed it to be really flat. So there's basically like 1 or 2 polygon layers in there. There's a line feature, a line feature class, and then there's 1 or 2 point feature classes. It's not like the local government information model or something when there's just tons of layers. It's very compact, and the reason we did that is we wanted people to be able to kind of slice and dice the data to visualize what they want, but also to make it so that it's easier to ask kind of intelligent questions. And it's also easier to maintain relationships. And one of the things that we found with indoor spaces is relationships are critically important. So if I need to find out what are all the assets that are in this meeting room or in this office space, I can ask that question and I can get the answer either through the attributes for that space or through the spatial relationship. That may sound like not a big deal to GIS people, but trust me, when you talk to somebody that's like a RUS professional or real estate and workplace services, that's a big deal for them, because now it's a hard problem for them to solve. And a lot of times they have to go through several spreadsheets or asset management programs and try to put all this disjointed information together just to answer that simple question, like what is inside this meeting room. So this allows them to actually do that a little bit easier. A little bit of a digression there, but you'll notice when I go to My Places, everything that I've searched for in this session in the application shows up under the recents. And I actually saved that location in building queue. And now that's listed as one of my places. I can revisit that at any time. And if I'm like, hey, I need to go, back over to Pat's office and see, him about something, maybe I want to bet. Usually doesn't happen though. Usually I'm going from his office to the ATM machine. So the app's kind of handy for that. And let's see here. The other thing we've implemented with the first release of the product is support for events. And this was an important thing for us kind of conceptually, because so much of what we've been doing is three-dimensional, kind of in the classic GIS sense. And this adds that fourth dimension. So now we can have time-based information. And that's really important even for something like, what we're doing this week, right? So this session is from 1 to 2. It's in this area, but, at 2 o'clock, it's going to switch over. There's going to be a different event that's happening in here. So we want to be able to support that either on campus or for something like the Dev Summit here. And really, I think that's about it for the web application. Here we're looking at the native Android application, ArcGIS Indoors Mobile for Android. And this is essentially the same map, only we've packaged this up now as a mobile map package. So what that means is all the data is local here on my device. Anytime I search for something or I solve a route from A to B to C to D, that's all right here locally on my device. And I can do the same kind of experience. If I click on a building, I can see information about that building. As I zoom in, more information becomes available. I can switch floors, click on an office, and also have those same action buttons. And you can see here that I have a contact. Because this is a phone, I could actually dial someone's phone number if they have it in the data. Here we're actually looking at the data for the office. I can save, share, 311, directions, all of that kind of stuff. I can also search for things on campus. And I'll search for the ATM machine. And that'll locate for that for me, and then also open this information card about the ATM. Go back. Now, one of the things too, because I'm connected to the portal, I can actually switch which map package I want to view. So this is where the kind of access control part of the ArcGIS portal comes in. So I can determine for an audience, based on their login, their username and password, I can actually set what information they have access to on the device. So if this is an employee who's accessing this, we have 2 different ones here. So one of them is all layers, and one is no people. So in this particular one, it's just a simple use case that we set up for the Dev Summit here. But now I can actually search for people. So if I wanted to search for myself, I can do that. And I can also get directions from, say, let me try to find somebody who's in queue. So get the same route from Pete's office to my office. And I can also swap that change the source to the destination. And you see here that the route uses stairs. So getting back to what I was talking about with the transitions and the network data set before, if I click on the wheelchair option, now the route actually goes through the elevators. So I can prioritize how I want to travel across campus. And really, this is just kind of a proof of concept for the things that you can model in and access in the network data set. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to kind of stick with the standard platform solutions, because that allows us to build on top of the new functionality that they put in there. And we can see a lot of other, similar things. If I want to find out, what version, this is going to come in handy after we release for reasons that I know from my days in support. And we can also see settings for the application, so I can turn location on. I can also turn device tracking off here in the application. And one other thing, this was working earlier. It's kind of annoying me that it's not now. Maybe it'll work. I think it'll work on my iPhone. So let's switch over to that real quick. And I will plug in. This iPhone tends to stay connected, and it did, so you don't have to wait for me to do that again. All right, so let's switch. There we go. And I'll open the ArcGIS Indoors application. Did you see, now I've got that blue dot in the middle of the thing. This was a pleasant surprise to me. We actually surveyed the Palm Springs Convention Center last year because we had more time. We weren't trying to release a product like right before the Dev Summit. To my surprise, it still works. So you can see that my location actually is pretty accurate. And unfortunately, we don't have a latest and greatest data set for the Palm Springs Convention Center. That would have been really cool. So next year, we'll probably have that available. And but you can see it's not too bad. And this is just using like Wi-Fi fingerprinting indoor positioning. And anyway, I thought that was kind of cool that it still worked. And so I can also search for things or find things, because this data that I'm looking at right now is for the Esri campus. I can go to that ATM machine, and it takes me right back to the Esri campus. So here we're looking again, same maps. You can see building queue, same functionality. I can explore, find things like the cafe. I can have all these same action buttons. If I search for someone, let's say William Isley, you'll notice now the contact is lit up. It's not grayed out anymore. And that's because he has actually a phone number and email. So if I find that person in the app, I can contact them. I can also share my location or a spot where I want to meet that person. The mobile app really is, having it running locally on these devices with all the sensors and stuff they have is really cool. IPS is really kind of the big differentiator because I can get a blue dot now on my device. And we have IPS support set up on campus, and we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. But that's really all I had for demos. I'm going to go through a few more slides, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end. So let me switch back. Okay, so how does all this work? Well, basically, the ArcGIS Indoors information model is what kind of makes everything happen in the platform for indoor data sets. So that data model is something that we have documented and will have documented with the first release of the product. Again, we tried to keep it simple. We've gone through probably 8 or 10 different revisions of that data model. We're trying to get it so that it contains just enough to do what we need it to do, And just like any other data model, if you guys find that it's short in some area, I mean, you can always add stuff on top of it. That's kind of our philosophy. We just want to give you the foundation. If you guys want to add additional functionality, you can always add additional attributes or additional feature classes. This is kind of a starting point. But it contains all of the basic stuff that you need to get these things done, all of the basic feature layers for what you're doing in your organization. Also, ArcGIS Indoors includes all of the software and extensions and everything that you need to make it work. So when you buy ArcGIS Indoors, it's not the same kind of licensing model that you're used to with other Esri software. It does not use a named user model. And we actually license it per square foot. So one of the main reasons that we did that is if you think about a use case like a university, they have employees that they want to be able to use the application with a username and password, but if they have a potential student coming to visit the university campus with their children or with their parents, then they don't want to force that person to use a username and password to log in because they're just not going to do it. And so our philosophy is when you purchase ArcGIS Indoors and you implement it, we want everybody to be able to use it. So everybody in your organization should be able to access it without having to have a named user account or any of that other kind of stuff. So the licensing is a little different, and I'm just a product engineer. So I've just told you everything I know about the licensing, but by all means come by the showcase. We'll have a lot of people down there that know a lot more than I do about it and can get into a lot more detail. But I can tell you that, and I want to reiterate, like the reason we did that was so that everyone can use it. And that, once you make these great maps available for your campus or your indoor spaces, that people don't have to worry about how they access it. They just access it. So one of the things we're also looking at making easier is incorporation of third-party data, especially for things like work order management systems are an obvious one, right? So if people have inspections or things that they need to do across campus, you want those to be able to have a nice indoor map and for that person to be able to route from where they are to where those things are, or do the traveling salesman problem, prioritize 10, 12 stops around campus in the most efficient way. The information model itself, I kind of mentioned, like, it's really built on top of a hierarchy. Where units, are part of zones, or part of sections, or part of levels, or part of a facility, or part of a campus, or part of a city, or part of a county, or part of a state, et cetera, et cetera. So this hierarchy really is kind of core to how we built the data model and to the relationship between the different things on campus. So this allows you to find, for example, all of the conference rooms that have a projector and are available between 3 and 6 p.m. That's a question you could ask of the data and you could get a realistic answer. We also have tracking zones, like I mentioned before. If somebody walks into a place that they're not supposed to be, you can have an alert happen, and geo event allows us to do all kinds of really cool stuff like that. Really in an hour, I don't have time to kind of get into all of that. Now, indoor positioning systems, something very close to my heart. So I was very pleased to hear, as a lot of you guys did in the last week, that we have acquired a company in Austria called Indoors. And Indoors has been a valuable partner of ours in terms of trying to make sense of this Wild West landscape of indoor positioning providers. You can't throw a rock, it seems like, in Silicon Valley without hitting somebody that's trying to do, indoor positioning or mapping or something like that. So they have been really helpful for us and will continue to do so in the future. So with the first release, our philosophy really is we don't care how you get the blue dot. I mean, you can use whatever technology you want. It just doesn't really do you that much good unless you have good indoor maps. So that's why our focus with ArcGIS Indoors is getting those really good maps, really accurate GIS data for the built environment, and then you can put the blue dot on top of that, and then you really got something. And if you want to implement that blue dot, Indoors is the partner that's going to really kind of be leading that effort with the first release. So pretty exciting. And I think I just hosed myself on one of my later slides, but I'm just very excited about it. So there's basically 3 different technologies that support this. And the most basic is Wi-Fi fingerprinting. It's a lot of times it's called triangulation, but it's really kind of not triangulation. It's like you have to survey, just like we did here at Palm Springs last year. You survey a building with an application that senses all the radio signals throughout the building. And what it does is it creates basically a fingerprint. Like in this location where I am on stage, there's a certain kind of pattern of how the radio waves come about, and there's certain MAC addresses that I can see, and there's a lot of information that you can gather from just the Wi-Fi infrastructure. And we can create a fingerprint from that, and then the application can use some intelligence to say, okay, well the fingerprint kind of looks like this where I am right now, so I must be kind of in that area of the convention center. And the good news is the infrastructure in a lot of places already exists. I mean, a lot of people already have Wi-Fi, but there are some technical challenges with it. If a Wi-Fi access point burns out, gets replaced, you put some new ones, then the fingerprint just changed, so you have to resurvey. Now, another solution is Bluetooth beacons, and it actually solves some of the issues with Wi-Fi, just because it can sense, you know, with some math, how close you are to the beacon, and some of the more advanced beacons can actually kind of have some intelligence with regards to one beacon and other beacons. We've got some mixed results kind of testing with that, some of those solutions, but kind of a next level up in terms of accuracy. So beacons can give you a little bit better accuracy than Wi-Fi. And of course, if you walk out of the building, GPS is still perfectly valid. It still works with ArcGIS indoors. If you're walking from one building to another, GPS kicks in when you walk outside, and that's pretty cool. Another thing that we're looking at is smart lighting. So we see here on the left Acuity Brands. Acuity is kind of a big player in the commercial space with retail specifically, with smart lighting. And smart lighting is a pretty impressive technology, and it looks like it shows a lot of promise. So we're experimenting with that as well. Some of the advantages to smart lighting is you can get really, really accurate three-dimensional positioning. The bad news is it's not cheap. So part of it is smart lighting was built with indoor positioning kind of in mind. The technology was developed with the idea that you want to try to locate someone's device in a building like really accurately, and some of them can get within, they claim, I haven't actually backed this up with real testing, but the claim is they can get within about a foot in 3 dimensions of where this device is inside the building, and that's pretty amazing. So we're very excited about that. We're trying to partner with Acuity to prototype some of this. In fact, we are partnering with Acuity. My understanding is we actually have hardware and we just need to get it installed, so we'll have to hopefully do that next week. And we also look into some of the major players. Cisco, I mentioned that earlier. They have several different layers of Wi-Fi positioning that you can set up with them. Aruba is also a very big player in the beacon space. And we're testing with all of these, and again, we're doing the testing, so hopefully you guys don't have to. I mean, it's going to take us a while to kind of build the library of all the different providers that we can support. At the first release, the list will be fairly short, but it'll be better than just having to roll the dice and pick one individual vendor. Our idea is if you can take a best of breed approach with indoor positioning, and our partnership with Indoors can allow you to just see the blue dot no matter which solution you pick. That's our goal. That's what we want to provide. And yeah, I did kind of hose myself with this slide. Indoors, get to know them. There's a lot of them here this week. If you have any questions about indoor positioning, definitely come by the showcase. And if they're not there, I probably will be. I'll be there for most of the week. So just let me know that you're interested in that. I'll answer what I can. I can also get contact information and get you guys in touch with people who can answer your questions. So half of what I want to do in this session today is just encourage you guys, because I only have this one session, and tell your friends, come by the Indoors booth in the showcase. We'll have conversations with you guys. That's why we're here this week. So wrapping up a little bit with a roadmap, what are some of the things we want to do after the first release? Well, we already have a lot of stuff queued up, and one of the things we want to do more of is dashboarding. We've prototyped with the Ops dashboard and ArcGIS Indoors maps, and it works. And in fact, it works pretty well. But there's just a couple of things that they're a little annoying. There's no floor picker, for example, in the ops dashboard yet, so we'd want to provide that. You can kind of roll your own with some of the things that are available in the ops dashboard, but it's not a very great experience. So, you know, it does work, but the experience isn't optimal. So we want to spend some time trying to make that a little more accessible. We want to enable editing, basic editing in the web and mobile apps. That would be something like adding a point, moving a point, changing attributes, just really basic stuff. We have other mobile applications that really specialize in editing, and we also want to try to integrate a little bit more with them. Operational system integration, you know, working with a lot of our partners to integrate with things like ArcGIS, CityWorks, those kinds of things. We want to support additional indoor positioning systems. We're going to continue to work with indoors. Now our R&D center in Austria, and we want to try to, you know, kind of continue to advance the tools for indoor map creation. Indoor positioning API, this being the Developer Summit. You guys want to know about APIs and SDKs. Our first effort in providing an SDK for ArcGIS Indoors is going to be related to indoor positioning. So stay tuned for that. And the rest of the SDKs, realistically, you already have. So I think once you stand up indoors maps, they're just web maps. And when you publish an indoor scene, it's just a web scene. The web application that you saw was not using some special indoors SDK, it was using the JavaScript API. So, I mean, a lot of that stuff just works. You can build mobile map packages, and we use the Android runtime SDK and the iOS runtime SDK. It's not some secret sauce special build that we get from the runtime team. It's just the off-the-shelf stuff. So once you guys get your hands on indoors data, indoors map packages, indoors web maps, that sort of thing, you should be able to just go nuts. So, and hopefully we'll get the location API soon, because that is a key component of any custom indoors app. You'll want to provide that blue dot experience for people you're developing apps for. We also want to do some more work with localization. And we're staying in touch really closely with the team that's working on BIM support in Pro. Directory to Revit models is very interesting to us for obvious reasons. We want to be able to incorporate that into our workflows a little bit more in a future release, and then also to continue with enhancements for routing, visualization, and printing. A lot of the stuff that I talked about, we want to work with cartographers, give you guys more advanced starting point with the maps and scenes that you create and publish for your constituents. And you know, this being the partner conference and an international dev summit, we are working very hard on localization. So just bear with us. It is a first release of a pretty comprehensive product, but we're working really closely with the internationalization, localization teams to make this a global product. So wanted to put that in there. So what's next? Well, we have 3 more days here in maybe 2 full days and 2.5 days here in Palm Springs. So I encourage you guys to think about this, to come by the showcase and talk to us. If you find somebody with the blue sticker on their badge for ArcGIS Indoors, that means they're probably on the team. So be sure and stop us and ask us questions. We didn't plan it that way, but I was like, hey, cool, a sticker, and we all put them on our badges. So pretty much we all have that. And other than that, please fill out the survey. And we have a little bit of time here for some questions if anybody has some. Yes? The question is, how do you know the spatial reference for the buildings? I'm trying to think of a concise answer for that question. So generally speaking, you'll want to start with some sort of a campus map that has a degree of accuracy that you're comfortable with. And when I say that, we've worked with university campuses who don't really have that much indoor information, but they have survey grade markers like around campus that they use as to kind of reference all their GIS data too. And so they have really good outdoor GIS data. They just don't have really good indoor GIS data. And just really quickly, if you're starting with CAD drawings, for example, and they're not geo-referenced, There's a new CAD toolbar in ArcGIS Pro, and so if you have that really good survey grade building footprint, you could reference your CAD drawing to that building footprint, but the short answer to your question is you have to start with the good coordinate system and some good reference data before you start putting these things into it. Does that make sense? Okay. But other than that, you can pick whatever coordinate system you want to. You're not limited to anything other than, in some cases, if you're doing 3D, global scenes, you may have to, accommodate a coordinate system that's not your standard. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, indoor tools you showed in ArcGIS Pro, do those require like an extension?
The question is the indoors tools in ArcGIS Pro, do they require an extension? The answer is no. So when you license ArcGIS indoors, it's per square foot, and it includes everything you need. So it includes Pro, all the extensions, Geo Event Server, Enterprise, all of it. Yes?
Do you have a tool to collect the fingerprinting?
The question is, do we have a tool to collect the fingerprinting? And I see someone out there that might know the answer to that. That's a yes, isn't it? Okay, so yes, we do. And that's going to be part of the indoors stuff.
Does it include electromagnetic?
The question is, I have to repeat it because of the recording. Does it include electromagnetic? And the answer is no. Yes? The question is about dependencies and other Esri software that's required for this. In general, the dependencies are kind of in the box. So once you license ArcGIS Indoors, it's all there. But there are some version dependencies. So with the first release, ArcGIS Pro, we require 2.3.2. And I know that hasn't been released yet, but it's coming out very soon. And also Enterprise 10.7. So we've worked with the core software teams in both of those teams to get some things included in Pro 2.3.2 and in Enterprise 10.7 that are required for ArcGIS Indoors to be able to work correctly. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes. Well, sorry about that. Yeah, and that's a great question. The question is, have we considered subsurface indoor spaces? And the answer is yes, because they present some really interesting use cases for us. Like we actually model that in. And so we use test data sets that have, any number of basement levels. There's one of my favorites actually has a basement mezzanine, which I didn't even know was a thing, but this building has it. It's got like 3 basement levels, and in between the first and second basement level is a mezzanine. So that's been a really good one for us. So we do support that in the data model, as many levels as you want to go down. If you have like the, bad guy layer, 57 layers, levels below the ground, you could model that in ArcGIS Indoors. And with that, also part of that answer is we also support like non-typical level names. Like if there's a mezzanine, obviously we support it, whether it's above ground or below ground. Also things like penthouses and, architects get pretty crazy with some of the way they design and name some of the levels in buildings. But we've really strived to try to support that and to try to challenge ourselves to support atypical use cases like San Francisco. The ground floor on a building on the top of the hill is very different from the ground floor of a building at the bottom of the hill. So how do we model that in a building? We're kind of tackling some of those problems right now, as a matter of fact. So, other questions? Yes. So that's a great question. Is the floor picker going to be a widget in the JavaScript API? The answer is yes, soon. It's not yet. That's kind of the second part of that API thing that I was talking about. So our first goal is to get the indoor positioning SDK packaged up and released so that people can use that with the runtimes. That's like a high priority. We have a lot of people asking us about that. So, but I'm a JavaScript developer by trade, so I'm asking the same questions. Like, I would love for us to have like a kind of an add-on set of indoor specific widgets that are probably available as a sample maybe at some point early on. Honestly, our long game is to get those things incorporated into the JavaScript API, so that you don't have to worry about putting some sort of a, you know, add-on or a set of custom widgets, or, you know, downloading a library from GitHub or something like that, that it just is in the API. But it's going to take some time for us to be able to get that in there. Yes?
Have you guys tested this on a parking garage?
The question is, have we tested it in a parking garage? And actually, we've done one better. And we've tested it with a parking garage that's attached to a building that does not have the same levels. Does that make sense? So the building, if it's a hotel or a hospital, will have floors that don't match up with the floors in the parking garage, but there's pedestrian bridges that go across and join like P3 to, you know, floor 2 or whatever. So we've tried to, we've modeled that kind of stuff in. It does make for some interesting kind of manual work, especially with the network. So you have to kind of maybe build one building and then build the other building and then kind of model the places where they match up. But it's it does work. So we've been working on that as well. Other questions? And I'll also put a shameless plug. If anybody wants to work with us and has like a really unique kind of building design, we're always looking for weird and funky architectural data sets that we can use for testing. And if there's no more questions, thank you guys. I appreciate it.